St. Joseph's College for Women, Visakhapatnam, Department of English, welcomes you for the online course on Effective Communication Skills, Module 2, Lecture 1. As the renowned communication expert Paul J. Mayer once said, communication, the human connection, is the key to personal and career success. In today's globalized world, verbal communication plays a vital role in connecting people across cultures, industries, and geographical boundaries. Module 2 includes 4 lectures, and each lecture has its unique role to play in communication. By the end of the module, the students are going to learn how to communicate verbally, articulate the vocabulary correctly, comprehend the nonverbal communication effectively, and to structure messages storytelling. Comprising all 4 lectures, we will delve into the importance of verbal communication, exploring its various facets and techniques. Lecture 1. What is verbal communication? In this, we talk about significance of English in various contexts, including business, education, and social interactions. And in lecture 2, we deal about the articulation and speech, and also the role of articulation in speech communication, techniques for improving articulation and speech clarity. And in lecture 3, we talk on nonverbal communication. We examine the various forms of nonverbal communication, including body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice. Also, the types and functions of nonverbal communication, impact of nonverbal clues on verbal messages. And the last lecture will be on message structuring and storytelling. In this, we will talk about the importance of message structuring in verbal communication, techniques for crafting compelling stories and narratives, and the strategies to enhance verbal communication. Well, I believe you will have gained a deeper understanding of importance of verbal communication and the skills necessary to communicate effectively. You will be able to apply the principles and the techniques learned in this module in various contexts, including personal and professional interactions. Let's begin our lecture 1 with the etymology of verbal. It is derived from a Latin word verbum, which means word. In other words, we can say it is related to words, and communication means common to everyone. When you put together, it is the use of words to convey information. Today's focus will be primarily on spoken words, which will help us to express our thoughts, ideas, and emotions. Spoken language is the thread that weaves the humanity together. Through words, we express our innermost thoughts, emotions, and ideas, dissolving conflicts, nurturing lasting relationships. Verbal communication is the heartbeat of our daily interactions, facilitating empathy, understanding, and deep connections with others. By tapping into the transformative power of spoken language, we can transcend barriers and forge unbreakable bonds. As you can see on the slide, it helps us to express the thoughts and ideas and emotions using spoken language. We exchange information, we interact with others, and we understand both in personal and professional setting. Now let's talk about why verbal communication is important. Initially, it starts with enhanced clarity, prevents misunderstanding, and ensures message accuracy. Secondly, it builds relationship, strengthens trust and connections. And the third one is it boosts confidence, improves fluency and public speaking. Let's talk more about in the next slide. Verbal communication facilitates learning. It aids in teaching and sharing knowledge. And then it helps to improve efficiency in workplace, enhances teamwork and productivity. It aids to resolve conflicts between the parties. It encourages respectful discussions. The last one, it is essential for leadership quality or to develop leadership skills. It helps to inspire, persuade, and influence the teammates. Now let's begin the next slide. In this lecture, we will discuss more on the types of verbal communications. You can see on the screen there are two types of verbal communication, oral and written. Oral communication, it involves the spoken words and is used in direct conversations, speeches or media. It always allows for immediate feedback and interactions. For example, face-to-face conversations, phone calls, public speeches, meetings and presentations, radio and TV broadcasts. When we talk about the written communication, which is in written words, ensuring clarity and record keeping. It is used in both formal and informal context. Example, letters and emails, reports and memos, text messages and chats, books and articles, advertisements and legal documents. Now let's just go in detail about the other different types of verbal communications. The very first thing we have interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication, it is always one-on-one communication between the individuals, such as the casual talks, interviews, or counseling sessions. Whereas the second one is the intra communication. Intra communication, it is all about talking to oneself, including a self talk within oneself or interdialogue, maybe you can say. And the third variety we have is the small group communication. In small group communication, like say for example, the meetings in the departments, a team of a small group interact, talk like a study group for the students. So they all comes under the small group communication. And the fourth variety, we have public communication, speaking to a large audience, including public speaking, presentations, and speeches. And the other variety, we have the mass communication. Mass communication, uh, it is the media, where you can see the social media communication at a one stretch reaches to many people beyond the boundaries, like the television, radio, and other online platforms. The last one we have organizational communication. The communication that happens inside the organization, within the working place or the institution, which includes the formal meetings, instructions, and corporate discussions. Elements of effective verbal communication. Now let's talk about the various elements that are very important for effective verbal communication. Let's see in the slide about 8 elements are there. Number 1, we start with be clear and concise, meaning use a simple vocabulary, direct language, avoid jargons and unnecessary details. That shows that you are interested to communicate with the other person clearly. Speak at a moderate pace, meaning you shouldn't rush with your sentences or the vocabulary. Take a pause to emphasize the key points that you want to convey. And the third one is use the right tone and a right volume, meaning adjust the tone according to the context and the settings or the situation that you are into. And the next one, listen actively. That you can show non-verbally by focusing on the speaker, nodding your head, and ask clarifying questions. That shows that you are attentive to the lecture and you are listening and trying to concentrate on what the speaker is going to convey. Mind your body language. This is again very important. As we all know, 70% of communication happens through our body language. So maintain eye contact, use open gestures like smile wherever necessary, whenever necessary. And the next element would be avoid filler words. Minimize the words like uh to sound confident. And then the seventh element, adapt to your audience, making sure that your tone and the language is different from one listener to the other so that you are appropriate to the setting and the context. And clearly summarize the key points, ensure that audience are understanding what you are trying to convey. And the next one, we talk about the barriers, or you can say the wall that comes between you and the audience. Um, if you can overcome all these barriers that are there on the slide, it would definitely helps for effective verbal communication. The very first barrier we could find in a verbal communication is the language barrier. Avoid there are different types of languages, accents, jargons, slangs, maybe you can say, can cause misunderstanding. So make sure that the language is not a barrier between you and the other party. Lack of clarity. Vague words always gives vague words, or bombastic words or polysyllabic words may not give a clarity for the audience if they are not good at the vocabulary. So vague words or the complex words or a technical language might always confuse the listeners. So make sure that these things are avoided. Poor listening skills. The other one is interrupting, getting interrupted between the lectures, and then doing multitasking and not giving or focusing on the speaker also makes or creates misunderstanding. Other one is the emotional barrier. If you are under stress or anger or anxiety can always affect how messages are sent and received. So emotional barrier is one of the reasons for not letting you to give a clear idea to the audience through your verbal communication. Cultural difference also there. If you're not okay with the audience, you might not feel like to give a clear idea to them, and then the variation occurs. So communication style, gestures, and expectations can cause confusion. Background noise, which is again a physical barrier, loud environments can cause or make difficult to hear and understand. Tone and body language mismatch creates again a barrier, and it creates the doubt as well in the audience. Overuse of filler words, as I said earlier in previous slide, excessive use of and like can reduce the credibility in the thought. And the next one is the information overload. Too much of information also makes the audience to get overwhelmed, and they may not like to listen or take too much of information into the brains. And then assumptions or the prejudice. So these things are biased always, which always creates or gives an idea that distorts the understanding of the audience. So all these are the barriers that cause in between and makes the person fail to get the effective verbal communication. This slide talks about the role play scenarios. Say, for example, handling customer service complaints, negotiating a job offer, or leading a team meeting. And also try to analyze the effective public speaking. Key takeaways. We spoke about etymology of verbal, introduction, importance, oral and written communication, types, effective, and barriers to verbal communication. Now let's meet in lecture 2, which will be on articulation and clarity in speech. Thank you for listening.